First met, 6th grade?
6th grade. I moved to Urbandale off of 83rd Street. Had just moved from Waukee. At this point, I had moved now, I think, 3 years in a row. Went from like State Center to Des Moines, from Des Moines to Waukee, then Waukee to Urbandale. And I remember meeting you the first day of 6th grade, not knowing a single soul. I remember sitting like in the. Remember when we went into the gym?
Well, first off, I remember. I think the first time I saw you was at recess. You were playing knockout, I think. I don't know what I was doing, like football or whatever. And I was like, "Who's this new kid?" Like, and I remembered you because playing basketball against you when we were younger, they were calling you Windex, or whatever it was. But I was like, "Oh my God, it's that one kid." And at first, I was like, "Hey, this is my territory. Like, who's this new kid over here winning a knockout?" I win a knockout.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were on the same class, different sides. But
Yeah.
the first time we actually met was in gym class, and I had all my friends and everything. And then there's this, you were like kind of sitting by yourself, and you're just like, "Hey, come over, sit by me."
I did that to you?
Yeah. And I was like, all right. Yeah, I was like, we introduce each other, and then kind of our relationship, I guess, the rest of middle school was history from there. You know,
Right.
kind of instant connection, just through sports, obviously. And you were still doing like all your local sports and like different leagues and everything. So it was really just kind of like feeling each other out in gym class.
Right.
And
The only
stuff.
time we really like interacted was at school.
Right.
Because at that point we were all. I mean, you were baseball wise, you were doing AAU and stuff. I had my own. I forgot what team I was playing for back then.
Well, you joined Little League, of course.
Yeah, I played for the Cubs.
Yeah, Little League.
I had the caged helmet. No, but
Courtesy of Kevin.
Yeah, shout out Kevin.
Shout out Kevin.
Thanks, Dad. But I remember we had our lockers right next to each other. Mm-hmm. You know, I remember my locker mate was Hussein. Hussein was my first friend at Urbandale because he was my locker mate.
Yeah.
And so I had to, in a sense, which he's a great guy and a lot of good laughs with him. But you were right next to me with Trey, and I think that's really kind of helped spark up our friendship and made it easier to kind of connect and get to know each other. And then obviously sports on top of that. But yeah, like you said, I mean, I think we definitely both have alpha male personalities, and throughout our friendship, we've definitely clashed multiple times.
Oh yeah.
Throwing a few blows here and there, but
really, I think like
all in all,
in middle school at least, like obviously the friendship developed pretty much right away. But then I would say probably in 8th grade, you know, that's the year that you're getting ready to go into high school. And that's probably, at least for me, the first time I thought about like what I wanted to do when I got there. And even just like, that's the kind of the age I feel like where you start to develop the ability to see just beyond what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. You know, just like playing sports locally, little leagues, you know, going to class, hanging out with your friends, and then repeating. But once you get to 8th grade, you're kind of facing that point of time where it's like, okay, there's another thing out there. I got to go to high school now. But then once you're in high school, you're thinking about college. You're thinking about all that stuff. So really, I think our relationship essentially started escalating around that age, where I can probably recall like our first conversations about like, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up?
Right.
Like, where do you want to go? Like, what do you want to do? You know? And you can probably speak on this as well, but like the conversations that we had, even from the earliest stages, like looking back, those were like big conversations.
Yeah.
Like we weren't talking about like, you know, hey, I want to get a job here. Like it was
always talking about, you know,
big things.
Yeah. Playing professional sports, really. I mean,
going to big schools,
having really big goals and dreams, and living a lavish lifestyle, or lazish. I should say.
Living lavish.
Living lavish. But yeah, I think another thing too, around 8th grade and high school is that we never played on any sports teams either. And I think like you said, our only interaction was really in PE, that 6th grade year, and then obviously 7th and 8th grade throughout that as well. But I just remember the first time we played on a team together was the Blue Jays, playing AAU baseball together. But I feel like our first time really really playing together was freshman year playing football
together
when we both.
For sure.
I think we played 2 games before.
2 or 3 games for you got.
Before I
got the call.
Before I got the call, I still remember that. I still remember Coach. I think it was Coach Anderson, had came up to us or to me, when we were doing freshman drills, and I thought that you were getting the call too, and I was like so excited.
Well, wait. First, we gotta even back to middle school. We're missing a huge part where summer. Was it going into 7th or going into 8th grade? Probably going to 8th grade when we started going to the 6 a.m. workouts together.
Right.
And that to me, that period of time to me was so pivotal in my life. Because, we were working out with the varsity football team.
Right.
Essentially, it was a varsity football team, a handful of others, and then...
a couple kids from the middle school.
Yeah. Us and Logan. Really were that summer.
My brother.
And Logan, he'd been in there for a while already, so. But I had no experience in a weight room whatsoever.
Right.
All I knew is that I wanted to get better. Because that's around, like I said, around the time where you and I started having conversations like, hey, I want to do this. Mm-hmm. It's like, all right, let's go do it. What do we have to do to get there? And step one, obviously, was we had to put in the time, additional time that other kids our age weren't doing. So that started with the 6 a.m. workouts at the high school, and we were partners the very first day.
Yeah. Well, we had to be. We were the same body
weakest
type.
Ones there.
Yeah, we were really the same body type and probably the same amount of strength. I think we're probably equal.
But I just remember though, people almost making fun of us that first day because the first lift was hang clean. We were just jumping in these workouts,
right.
And I didn't even know what any of these things were other than bench press and squat.
Right. And those are still a struggle because
right.
Still
we had never done
a foreign movement in a sense. Yeah.
But we were doing hang cleans, and I remember people making comments to us, and I was almost embarrassed to be there at first. But then Coach DeBrink, I don't know if you remember this at all, but
Coach
seriously it's stuck in my head for years now. But he came up to us, and he said something along the lines of yeah, they might be poking fun at you now, but you guys are the youngest ones here to see what happens when you stick it out. Mm-hmm. And that was really all I needed to hear to feel comfortable in that environment, and just knowing that you and I are on this track together, and that's how it was going to be.
Right. And
so we stuck it out the whole entire summer, and that essentially gave me the confidence, at least, hey, I'm already there. I still have a year left in middle school, but I'm already on the fast track, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Coach DeBrink was pivotal for both of us.
Huge.
And
Huge.
Definitely at the time when we first met him, and then throughout high school, probably couldn't have really understood his structure and his discipline, and didn't agree with a lot of his things. Being a arrogant teenager.
And first off, Coach DeBrink, he was the assistant football coach.
Yeah.
He was a former Division I athlete at Iowa State.
Yeah, he played at Iowa State.
And he was the guy, essentially, that behind-the-scenes mentor that one of my first ones I had. Obviously, Dan was a big one for me.
But outside of your family.
Outside of my family and immediate, friend circle, he was my first big mentor. Where he's the guy that's showing up to the school every day at 5:30, making sure everything's unlocked.
Volunteering too.
Yeah, all volunteering, workouts all written, everything.
And then still going to teach.
And then still, yeah. He was one of those figures that every kid essentially needs at that age. And he was hard. He was tough.
Yeah.
You're low key scared of the guy.
Right.
And
yeah, definitely was scared of him a few times.
Yeah.
Especially during track.
Yeah, that's a whole different story.
Coach T, appreciate you. But no, I think, yeah, so like going back to the Blue Jays thing, when we first started playing with each other, I think that was when our bond really started to click, especially on the football field. And especially, those first 2-3 games, I feel like we just went out there and just dominated and really just imposed our power. And I think, like you said, that really came from the year or two before, in that summer, really, of just like putting in the work beforehand and creating that structure of putting in the work in the front end and reaping the benefits in the future. And I think that really, kind of just really started that foundation.
On a really small scale too.
A very small scale.
The principles remain. It's like you have something you want to do, and so we were doing this, and this to be able to accomplish that. And you don't realize the power of it at that age, but how simple it is.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of when it all originally started. But then moving into high school, though, like freshman year, like you're talking about, I think that's kind of the age that we were at where it's like, hey, we're in high school now. And it's, what are we doing beyond this? Like, what do you want to do? And I remember being at, after school at your house or my house or anywhere, and just the things that we would talk about that I didn't feel comfortable talking about really to anyone else. Because if we were talking about these things openly in front of everyone else, you might come off as arrogant or
it's like
unrealistic.
It's just swept underneath the rug and kind of played off.
Yeah, because
not really taken serious.
Well, just like the reality of just the area that we grew up in Central Iowa, great place to grow up, of course.
Right.
But it wasn't really a commonality for people to accomplish huge things in athletics coming from there. It's not considered a hotbed of talent per se,
right.
like some other areas of the country might be. But to me, it was like that doesn't have to be accepted as reality for me.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I didn't have any friends or family that had gone outside of that, to me it was an expectation at that point. I already knew that it was going to happen, but it was how it was going to happen. And same thing for you too. You weren't talking about going to the local JCs. You're talking about going to Power 5 schools.
Right.
And we were talking about that 14, 15 years old.
Yeah, I think that definitely started around freshman year. And I think freshman year we were both able to come into our own identities in some way of kind of getting that validation. Because, like you said, that's that weird age where you're kind of growing up and, like you said, you're not living on
things are new.
So much things with your body's changing, your mind's changing. You're not living on the day-to-day, just thinking about going to school and hanging out with your friends. Or you're thinking about future long-term plans. And when we were going into high school and knowing that that's what we wanted to do, and then be able to go out there that freshman year and kind of be able to, make somewhat of an identity for ourselves in that aspect with sports, I think really kind of was able to spark something in both of us to be able to my throat spark something in both of us to kind of be able to build off of and be able to take that vision and that dream actually serious and to be able to work for
Yeah.
I think kind of go back to Brink. He like we said, he's probably the first mentor outside of immediate family, or family friends that you and I probably both looked up to. But I think there was other guys too, like you said, Dan Shook. I think it was very pivotal.
Huge.
Probably more so for you than me. He was involved with you at a very young age, being a coach. But just hearing his speeches and him talk to us and sit us down one-on-one and together as well, separating us from the rest of the teams and really believing in us. And then I think both of our fathers as well. I think your dad, when I was playing on the Blue Jays, your dad treated me just like he treated you, and I think and the rest of the team, and he was very hard on us. And
He expected success.
He expected so much, and
He
I think that
expected to
really
win.
pushed us, put us in that uncomfortable level. I think especially for me, playing baseball because it wasn't as natural to come to me, but I think it created that accountability in me because I knew I wasn't as good and as talented, that I had to do more than maybe what you or some of the other kids on our team, because they've been playing and had the coaching for several years, and I think I'll never forget when your dad like cussed me out after that one Little League game, but my dad too, being for football, and
Coaching
just
me,
coaching you, helping with that, and just like, I think just his devotion, and looking back on it, just seeing how much he cared about, obviously me being his son, but just everyone in the team, and we were having those Thursday night film meetings where my mom would cook spaghetti and everyone would come over.
Dude, yeah,
and stuff.
those meetings, but also just like when I would just casually come over to your house to hang out on a weekend, and there's college football on, there's NFL on, whatever, and we're watching the game, and I remember just like, I appreciate it now so much to see what it did for you, but I just remember watching those games with you guys back then, and I'd been so frustrated because you couldn't even watch 3 plays in a row without him rewinding it and pointing out every single little detail that happened in that play.
Right.
And obviously, I mean, you were frustrated with it too. You were 12, 13 years old.
Yeah, and it was my dad,
Yeah, it's your dad, and I'm your friend sitting there. You're probably embarrassed and everything, but you look back on it, the knowledge that you got and how to be detail-oriented developed your instincts at such an early age where...
So much.
Right, on both sides of the ball. Just learning everything.
Yeah, I definitely think my dad's his attention to detail and just his ADD, of just picking out every fine little thing and depicting it, has helped me so much of just like naturally, just like, even though I didn't think I was listening and paying attention. I was trying to ignore it, but just hearing it for so many years and so many years, I've been doing it over and over.
Yeah.
Just integrated, just of how to play football and different possibilities, and not just to think one dimensional. I think that's really where it taught me that, of not just to think of about just lines on a paper, think outside the box. You know what I'm saying? Of trying to be different, trying to do something new. And I think that's really that built so much into who I am as a football player today. And then also, that's also helped me build into who I am as a man as well.
Of course. All those figures that we talked about. I mean,
and so many other ones as well, but I think, those guys.
And if you could sum up essentially this, like the lessons or the principles that were learned and developed between those characters at a young age. Discipline. I mean, being in 8th grade, waking up on your own at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, that was
and
tough.
then being in the gym at 6, and then going to school at 8, and then having practice afterwards after that till 6. I mean, that's a pretty rigorous schedule for a young kid. And so it develops that discipline. It develops the accountability, knowing that your teammates are there counting on you. And just the accountability to the higher standard that you and I would hold each other, because my personality is like, I don't want you to beat me.
Right.
You didn't want me to beat you. And that's why when you talk about how we would clash sometimes, like just playing a pickup basketball game, it ends in a fist fight. Because like desperately, there's no way I would want anyone to beat me at those things.
Even though I was that much better.
And so I got you a few times.
Maybe.
But just like every single day was a competition.
Oh, yeah.
There was not a single day that you could essentially take off or take lightly, because that would be the day that you would essentially give up your spot at the top. In the pecking order. The invisible pecking order back then. But really at that age too, it's like, our freshman year kind of going into our sophomore year is when things like we started to get pretty serious about it, about what we wanted to do, where we wanted to go, and being specific about it, talking in detail about here's how it's going to happen. And speeding up into sophomore year, essentially, that's when the label of ATT kind of came into play.
Right.
With that
whole sophomore year.
Yeah, it's that sophomore year. But essentially, it was around. ATT was around from day one.
Right.
The complete origins of it started in middle school, 6th grade, from the time that we met.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I mean, ATT it's about relationships and holding yourself to those standards, and that's when it started. But it got its label fall of sophomore year when that one song came out.
Well, I think, it happened. Right, it happened when the Us song came out at the top. But before that, I think I had my breakout year.
The first game of the year, honestly, your first game sophomore year was like, okay, like I knew this was gonna happen, but like this is the day that it happened, essentially against Hoover.
Right.
When you had like 3 touchdowns in 5 minutes or something crazy.
Yeah, three pick sixes and a half or whatever, so national record.
Punt return.
I had a punt return that I ended up getting called back, and that was like really when more people, or people outside of myself, I feel like,
that was the first time,
or immediate friends, like saw me do something special,
big, like on a bigger scene. And that was just still a varsity high school football game, but that was the first time that Lazard was in print.
Right.
And later after that, the article, and like it was like the front page of the sports page, and you were a sophomore. It was about you breaking whatever record you broke, 3 touchdowns and 3 pick sixes in 1/2 was a national record. And you were like catching a football, like posing like you were catching a football, and
Coach Anderson's office from the fat head.
Right, yeah. And you're like holding up the triangle.
Right.
And then around that same time, that song came out. Lyrics, you're saying at the top, it's just us.
Yeah.
And we already kind of been doing the triangle, and it kind of just became a thing at that point. Obviously, it's kind of evolved a little bit since then, but the triangle at the top, it kind of just made sense, like you're at the peak of the triangle. And that's how we carry ourselves. I mean, it could be viewed as arrogant, it could be viewed as cocky, but if you really knew the roots of it all, it's really just a belief in yourself, a belief in each other.
Just a belief in that you can be the best you today.
Exactly. And it was a daily battle to hold yourself to that standard.
Yeah. And
it couldn't have been done alone.
Yeah, I think battle is a great word because it's not easy, It's not something that you can just wake up and everyone's able to do it, I think it's something that takes a lot of discipline, a lot of commitment and sacrifice.
Right.
On multiple levels, long-term, short-term, whatever it may be, and being able to adjust and adapt to anything that really life hits you with.
But even like when you say sacrifice too, like if I think back to the stuff that I did back then, like what I did when I came home from school, like a lot of times missing my homework because I had other more important priorities but from the everyday person or just someone, just a random person, if they saw how I operated back then but didn't know what was going on like internally, I'm sure people could say the same thing about you. It seemed like why are you doing that? Like why is it worth, like why are you putting in that much time?
Right.
Like why are you missing this? Like why is this lacking for this doesn't even matter. Like of course
they're putting you in a box essentially and not thinking that you could get outside of that box.
But when you speak on like sacrifices though, and like you think about all the things that you sacrificed back then, you continue to sacrifice today, relationships, time, friends, experiences, like you name it, but I wouldn't even label that a sacrifice in my opinion, because the vision that I had for myself and the vision that you had for yourself, like it doesn't feel like a sacrifice when that's what you're meant to do.
Right.
It doesn't feel like that's your life. That's what you embody. So the little things that other people might consider like sacrifices, it's just a part of who you are and what you do. So it doesn't even feel like a sacrifice at that point, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think once you know what you have to do to get there, it just makes sense to do it.
It's a part of it.
You don't question it. It's not tedious. It's not time consuming. You enjoy it. It's what you feel is right. What makes you happy ultimately. you know, and it's a part of the plan, you know, the part of life of where you have to do this today so you can get to wherever tomorrow, essentially, and so on and so on. But kind of going back to ATT, um, I know for me, when I really first started getting popularity or getting some acknowledgement outside of the local Des Moines area was when I got my first offer. And really my first 3 offers, but my first offer came right after sophomore year had concluded. I remember I was sitting in my living room, like middle of May, and Coach Rhodes had called me and said he wanted to offer me. And I just remember being so ecstatic and like not really believing like that was a real thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Or that happened at such a young age.
right, and it's just like, I had never heard of anyone else doing that, you know? And so it seems almost like a mythical thing because I had no one else to
Relate that experience
for to use as reference.
Right.
And so when that happened, it was like somewhat surreal, you know. And I definitely remember crying a little bit, getting teary eyed, and just like realizing like, wow, like this is this is actually happening, you know. And I remember it happened like so organically and naturally. Like it wasn't like it was, you know, I went out, I'm gonna go play this game, and then this is what's gonna happen. The coach is gonna call me after or whatever. No, it was just a random day. I remember sitting in my living room playing 2K12, and coach called me, you know, and it was just like, just happened so naturally and organically. I think that just really started to show me of like, that's how life is, you know.
Right.
And that's learning how to accept life, and those events gonna come out of you, are gonna come out of nowhere, and really they could be positive or negative, but you know, ultimately it's how
you're going to reap the fruits of your labor, whether it's good or bad.
Exactly.
You know, and at that point for you, like I know you're really a big believer on manifesting, and that was probably your first experience where you had set an intention, however back long it was, that you were going to play at that level, and so you did what you had to do to get there. And then it happened, seemingly out of nowhere, but it happened. And then same thing for me too. It's like you fast forward, your first offer was in May. My first offer was in June.
Yeah.
It was, or July, end of our baseball season.
Yeah.
And I remember exactly vividly what my experience was with my first one too. And first off, to back up, I believe in 8th grade I had set the goal going into high school that I wanted to get a scholarship from the University of Iowa. Mm-hmm. That was my favorite school. I wanted to play for Iowa. And, you know, you got your first offer from Iowa State, your favorite school.
Yeah.
And then 2 months later, it was our last game of sophomore year. We were playing in the district or sub-state semifinal, I believe, against Johnston. And I had a really good game, and I remember the Iowa coach being there. And I remember calling you the next day because I had a great game, and I was like, hey, like, do you think I should call the coach? Like, and you're like, yeah, just call him.
Yeah.
And it was so weird how it happened because I had made the decision I was going to call the coach. And I don't know what I was going to say, but I was, you know, 15, 16 years old, and I was like, I'm just going to call this coach because he was at my game yesterday, and I showed out. And it was probably 20 minutes later, I was probably debating what I was going to say, but 20 minutes later I got a call from him. He called me.
Yeah.
And same exact thing. He offered me on the phone. It was kind of different because you were kind of just chilling.
You're right.
And to me it seemed like I was actively pursuing it because I was
Right.
going to call the guy, but then just so happened, just how life worked out is
Right.
he called me. But what was crazy is in 8th grade when I had set the intention that I was going to play at this level, I was hopeful that it would happen by the time I graduated high school. But that's how crazy it is when you set the intention and the goal, and it's clear and concrete in your head, and you take just massive action towards that goal, how quick it can speed up and happen. And then so from there, it was like a paradigm shift for me where it's like, damn, I accomplished like my goal. Like I can go to Iowa if I want. I was hoping I could go there by my senior year. Well, now it's here at my sophomore year.
Yeah. like what do I do
Yeah,
now?
like
Essentially,
do I take the foot off the gas pedal because I did it?
right?
And do I just like commit to Iowa? Or do I expand more? And then you went through the same exact thing too, where it's like Iowa State, I'm sure for you growing up, seeing your dad play there,
Yeah.
eventually your
Games all the
brother
time.
going there, it
Right.
was like you've envisioned yourself playing for Iowa State. I envisioned myself playing for Iowa. So that's the first school you think about. But then it's like, how much more of a reach can I establish? How farther can I go?
Right.
And so that's when really things escalated with ATT, where it's like ATT is a thing. We know what it represented. It represented the mindset that we had, the lifestyle that we lived, and the standards that we would hold each other accountable to. And it was not letting your foot off the gas pedal. It's pushing it down even farther. How much more can you get out of it? So that's been, for me, when I started going crazy. Like I would just, like I got that one, and I just try to snowball it. I try to build on that success. And I've heard you talk a lot about that. You knock one thing wrong off the ladder, what's the next one? How much higher can you reach?
Yeah.
And so that's when, too, around the same time where you started. When did you go to the opening? Was it junior year?
It wasn't until the next summer.
The next summer?
Yeah, well, so to backtrack a little bit too, my sophomore year, all I did was really play safety and defense.
Right.
I played a little offense, but I wasn't really a wide receiver, or that wasn't my identity as a football player, was offense.
Yeah.
But growing up, I had played wide receiver really since 6th grade with the Jaguars, and that's when I started like really watching football for specific players, watching Randy Moss, Jerry Rice, Marquise Colston, and guys like that, and paying attention to a certain position rather than just watching football just to watch football. And so I really, that's where I envisioned myself as playing a receiver in the National Football League. That's really kind of where it started. So when I ended up playing sophomore year, and I was just primarily playing defense, I think that's what helped me excel, having those 3 pick sixes because, I was using my wide receiver skill set or mindset
Just on the other
just
side.
on the other side of the ball, and using my brain defense that my dad had kind of coached me up on to be instinctual. But it wasn't really till my junior year is when I broke out as a wide receiver. So my first 3 offers really were for defense.
Just as probably an athlete.
Just as really an athlete, primarily just from my defensive film. But then my junior year is really when I made a lot of noise.
You're on the national scene.
And I expanded. My 3 offers at that time were Iowa, Iowa State, and Nebraska, which were the 3 pretty close local schools. And by the end of my junior year, I believe I had. But by the time I ended up signing in my national out of 10, I think I had 7 or 8 offers. And I picked up like Cal, Stanford, Oregon, Notre Dame, LSU. I think that was it. But getting that attention from from those bigger schools really made me question. Not necessarily question, but like realize I'm getting the validation that I'm better than just this local scale of Central Iowa or the Midwest. That watching guys like DeAnthony Thomas play for Oregon and guys all around the country play for these different teams, and realizing that I could go out there and really do that, and kind of having that validation is really, I think, the second part of getting that momentum going. I can remember countless times throughout my entire career of getting the validation of a simple conversation or a simple acknowledgement from some certain players, coaches, players, coaches, families, friends, or whatever interactions that helped me realize I was on the right path and I was doing the right thing. And those are kind of like the life checkpoints. It's like, okay, yeah. You know what you're doing is right. You know what I mean, and you're heading the right way. So once I got that first one, or this I think was my first one from a national scale, and then really what spring-loaded that even more so was After my junior year, I remember February, I was like sitting in my study hall class, and I remember, I don't know if you were as much as I was, but I remember I was really heavy into like Rivals and ESPN.
And that was like perfect game.
Yeah, but perfect game, exactly. Just tracking that, watching the kids before us getting who's going where to what schools, what players, So I remember like almost studying the class of 15 or class of 13 and class of 12.
I did the same thing.
Just like
trying to compare yourself to
comparing
people,
myself
like
constantly. Seeing how I would match up, height, weight, speed, highlight videos. I just remember constantly spending time on that website. But my junior year, I was remember sitting in Spanish class, I would get on there every day almost and watching different other people on Rivals. And it finally came out for the 2014 class, the final ranking, or the first rankings, official rankings. And I remember I was ranked the first wide receiver for the 2014 class. And I remember just staring at the screen and like, I was scared.
Yeah.
I was terrified.
That was like the first time that you got like outside expectations to perform at a certain level.
Right. And that was the first time, like you said, it was just like, I knew that's what I was going for. And that's what I wanted ultimately. But I wasn't ready for it, essentially. I didn't know what it meant to hold the number one title. And it in a sense, like, I don't even want to make it a big thing of the number one, that those rankings even mean anything to begin with.
But at the time,
by the time it does to a certain extent, because that's what helped push me and motivated me. You know what I'm saying? As far as now, I think a little bit different of it, but during that time period, I think it was huge, because it allowed me to compare myself and allowed me to compete with myself, knowing I had something to go against me. But I'll never forget, like, that was the ultimate, like, holy shit. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, me too. I was hearing that.
And I remember Josh Hemholt, who was the head of the Rivals for like the Midwest, and he had called me in a few times. We had a couple of interactions, and I just remember him just interviewing me all the time. And he was really the only person that did. Because you don't really get interviewed as a high school, especially back then. I think it looks a little bit more different now, just with social media and everything.
Different platforms.
I think when we were, it was kind of a little bit still, outdated. Not outdated, but just not really a norm, I guess.
You had a couple platforms that you can get attention on.
Right. There were some like message boards and stuff like that would reach out, but it really wasn't too big. But Josh Hemholt, from Rivals, being like the biggest, in my eyes, the biggest football high school recruiting website, for him to reach out to me and really I knew that he was kind of a reason for why I got that number one tag and believing in me. And that was the first time anyone outside of the local Des Moines area, or we talked about TeBrink, being outside of our immediate family, like this is first person really outside of Iowa that
outside on the national scale is your first person taking
says like, hey, I like that kid and I think he's really good and I believe in him. And I don't know this guy at all. And that just that was the ultimate like flame that really started and sparked me and really helped me with the whole ATT mindset of being at the top. And I was like, because I remember I held that title and then I went out there that summer and I didn't perform in a sense at those camps, to a high performance levels. And I ended up losing the ranking or whatever.
That was just what I was going to ask you. Like, what kind of problems do you think occurred where it was like you maybe fell into the outside pressure of having that title, or the outside pressure of just expecting you to succeed at a certain level? Did you go through any, I guess, experiences where it's like, oh yeah, now looking back, like I didn't have to act that way or think that way, or
yeah, I think it was more so like we had hit on beforehand, like where we grew up, our community wasn't a hotbed for a lot of athletes, and it was hard to look up to someone else that was
locally,
yeah, that we could somewhat, follow their path,
Right.
and because I felt like what we were doing was we were surpassing people that were essentially our idols when we were, middle school. We were looking up to the high schooler kids, and once we first got into high school as seniors and that stuff, and we were seeing those people. That was the end of their careers.
You're
essentially.
kind of in uncharted territory at that point,
right?
And even for your family too. My family,
right?
It's
100%.
like everything's a new experience, so of course there's going to be trial and error into that.
Yeah.
And like my experience, like jumping the gun, in a sense of, I felt like I had to commit. I started getting my first offers. I felt like I had to commit. Kansas State, it was like Power 5 school, Big 12, like
right.
good facility and everything, like everything checked out, and I pulled the trigger, but at the time I was like 6 foot, like $160 soaking wet, and then the next year, like junior year, 25 pounds heavier,
right.
So like for me, and I know like you're really big, like you always talk to me now, and you've probably been one of my personal biggest mentors in this area, because it's not my nature to do this, but sitting back and being patient and letting things play out the way they're supposed to, where for me it's like I have a tendency sometimes to be like, oh, this is happening, like let's do it, like being more like quick and trying
right.
to get these things done versus just letting it all play out, where you had essentially the experience of going on more visits and entertaining other offers from different schools.
Right.
Where for me, after Iowa,
you shut it down.
And a couple of the other like Midwest schools, I saw Kansas State and I just did it.
Right.
But then in the meantime, I'm still picking up my workload. I'm getting bigger, faster, stronger, and I am getting attention from schools on the national scale. But I have given my word to Kansas State, that I had my hands tied essentially,
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember when we both committed. Well, let's talk about when I committed.
Oh yeah, that was crazy. Honestly. I think I should take this one, honestly.
You want to?
I want to tell my side, then I want to hear your side.
Who should go first, you think? Should I tell my story? I don't know. No,
Well,
I think yours. I like your version.
Well, first off, like, I did not, like, back then, I did not want you to go there.
Right.
And I've always been blunt with you. Like, I will tell you whatever's on my mind. And that's why our relationship is so strong, but that's why we also bump heads, because, like, you're the same way with me.
Yeah,
You'll tell me when I'm off, I'll tell you when you're off. And to me, like, you were totally, it was a biased opinion, of course. You were missing on that big time, so, like,
I don't know about that.
I didn't expect you to suit up in the black and gold by any means, but,
right.
You were...
We talked about it, though.
Yeah.
We both talked about it.
You came to an Iowa game with me, bro.
Right.
Like, and
right. I took a visit there, and we really, our vision was, like...
Play the same school.
Playing at the same school.
Right.
And ultimately playing in the same city.
Dude, I remember, like, you would get, like, an offer from a school, or you would, like, get a letter or something.
Right.
And then I was like, all right, I gotta go get them. It's like, we talked about some crazy schools, too. Like, Ohio State, Miami.
Yeah. LSU.
Yeah.
Oregon.
But, yeah, we kind of just... back to the commitment day. So, yeah, I didn't want you to go there, of course. Like, that was when I was hoping you weren't, because I was seeing all the other schools on the board. I was like, look at that one. Like, you can play in the horseshoe, dude.
Right.
Like, but then it was just...
But I didn't have the offers at the time yet, though, either.
Right.
At that time, all I had was Iowa State, and Nebraska. And this was right after my sophomore year. No, right after my junior year.
We did commit around the same time. I totally forgot about that.
It was right after my junior. You committed first, right?
I committed first.
Yeah, because you committed in November.
Yeah, that's right.
I committed in December.
That's not funny.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
How close was it to your birthday?
It was like December 3rd or something like that.
Really?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just a regular day. Nothing crazy going on or anything, but Coach Rhodes was visiting the school that afternoon.
Right. I got word.
It was like it was in the morning, and you come up to me, and you're like, hey, don't tell anyone this. And I was like, what? And I thought you were going to say something stupid. And you're like, I'm committed to Iowa State today.
Right.
And I just remember being so pissed. And I was like, dude, no. And I was like, have you
I remember you didn't believe me at first.
Yeah, I didn't believe you at first. And then you said you hadn't even told your parents yet. And I was the first person you told that you were committing to Iowa State. And I still did not believe you until you called me after you met him. And then it was all over Twitter and everything, like that you had committed and it's blowing up. And that's another reason too, like I feel like a lot of young athletes cannot fall into the trap of committing just for clout. Yeah, because to be honest with myself, like of course, like I'm 16 years old, 15, 16 years old.
See
like
that instant gratification.
You see like, oh yeah, you know, so-and-so verbally committed to whatever school. And it's like, oh, I got offers too. I can do that. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, you get more attention, and that probably played a part in it for me.
I think we both made the mistake of we both wanted the gratification and to do it.
To have a label.
Yeah, to have that label and the acknowledgement, and because it was like, all right, let me finally commit so I know where I'm going, and this is where I'm going to, you know, to set out a goal. Because it's hard to envision those goals when you don't even know where you're going to be.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And we got to the point where how we were raised on being so loyal to our word and everything. You know, we just did the first thing that really felt natural.
Yeah, it just felt right for me.
And felt right, you know, and really, not say it was a mistake, but, you know, I think making that decision at that, doing how I did it, which I guess I can get into now, but yeah, so I just remember, like I said, I remember telling you, that day, and I remember like walking down towards PE class because I met him in Coach Anderson's office, and I was nervous as shit the whole time.
Yeah.
And then I remember Coach like talking to me. We were sitting in his office. He was talking to me and saying how much he loved my film and thought of what I could do for Iowa State and for the future and everything. And I was like, yeah, Coach, like I would love to do that, and that's why I'm gonna commit. He said, shut the fuck up. Slaps the chair. And I just remember like giving him a hug. And I just felt like, man, like I was just like, I'm doing the right thing. You know?
It just felt right.
It just felt so right.
So did you, after you committed,
and
just to be totally transparent, like how many times did you, like, because of course, like, you know, that's the coach's job. And this is something you don't realize when you're younger too. It's like, it's their job to sell you on everything. The experience is going to be perfect. Everyone's going to be super nice to you. Mm-hmm. And of course, like the reality, no matter what, it's going to be different when you actually show up, even if it is the right fit.
Right.
But how often did you feel like, hey, am I doing the right thing? Like, of course, in the moment it feels right. Mm-hmm. It felt right when I committed to Kansas State. Right. I was probably on the verge of committing to Iowa too, because that felt right. Everything felt right when you're on the visit. But I guess, yeah, how often do you think over the next couple of years before signing day?
Well, let me take you a little bit back further to like why I committed at the moment. Iowa State was heading in the right direction at that time. They were 6-6, going to fourth, fifth straight bowl game maybe. And it looked like they had a bright future. My brother had just enrolled there that fall. So I had a familiar face up there that I could know and trust, and then so
you've been on the campus your whole life.
And my dad and parents, and I've lived 30-40 minutes away, you know, so it's hard not to. But it's also, I think a big part of that also plays into my experience that I had with Ohio State earlier, and I drove out to Ohio State, out to Columbus. Remember, right after a football game, we spent like 9 hours driving through the night to go to the game. The game was a night game. And I remember going up to Coach Urban Meyer's his hotel room and meeting him. And like that being like the first like ultra figure. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? That I was like shook.
Right.
On like, this is someone I've heard about on TV, you know, and this doesn't seem like a real person. I was able to finally meet him, and that experience, you know, shook me. But at the same time, by the end of it, to wrap up that experience, he basically said, you know, I really like your film, and you know, I think you're really talented, but I want to wait to see if we want to offer you. And that right there, just like shook me because of like I did all this just for you to come out here, just to come out here and for you to tell me that was kind of like a slap in the face, and like I felt disrespected in a sense. And so relating that relationship right there back to the one I had with Iowa State, where it was
You were actually wanted.
when I was super wanted sunshine and dance, like you know what I mean, like everything was perfect. Every time I go up there, I got so much love and attention, and you know, especially as a 15, 16-year-old, you know, you don't get that. You know, when do you really experience that, or like how do you know how to go about experiencing those things, you know, and getting the stardom and people recognizing you in the public eye and everything. So I think that's why I kind of like rushed into it. And then throughout the next 17 months or whatever it was until I signed, they obviously had like ended up having a bad year the next year, going 3-9. And like I said earlier, you know, I think two things. One, I valued my word so much because I feel like that's how I was raised, and you know, I don't want anyone to ever disrespect my word or to think it's not worth anything or it's not valuable. I want, you know, when I speak, I want to be people to listen, to understand, and to
have the trust. Yeah.
To have the trust, and you know, I value that so much with each and every relationship that I have. And another part of that is that my vision the whole time was never to go to Iowa State and to have a great career and that be it. My goal was to play in the NFL.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter what school I went to, in a sense. You know what I mean? Because it's just a segue.
Right. That's your vehicle of choice,
right,
essentially, to your final destination.
And like you said, it was my segue, my vehicle of choice to kind of get to the NFL. So I knew that's where I wanted to go. So it didn't really matter to me, and I knew, or I believed in myself so much. Like looking back, I was crazy, like on how much I believed in myself that I would go there and be able to completely change everything and be able to go on to, like every game I went to, and I still do now, I guess, is like, I just never think about losing.
Yeah.
You know, and it's asinine in a sense. But like, that's really what I believed as a kid, like going to Iowa State, that I was going to go there and change the program to be this national championship winning program. And looking back, my record doesn't reflect that, but
I feel like you squeezed as much as you could out of it.
But yeah, I gave the most I ever could to that university, to my teammates, to my coaches there, every single game. And I think what I did then is reaping more benefits now when you see the success of the program, or at least I hope so, to see where it's going to in the future as well. So knowing that, you know, I may not be the one hosting up the trophies and all that stuff, which, you know, I was very fortunate to do my senior year, but to get all that stardom and fame, because, you know, for me at Iowa State, I was like comparing myself to the basketball players who were going to the Sweet 16 every year and playing these top 10 games and winning them, and you know, that's what I dreamed about, and that's why I craved, and I was like, damn, I never felt like I was doing it, but I was, in a sense, because I was still pushing myself every single day, and even though I didn't get the wins in the bowl game trophies and all that stuff, you know, it helped me put me in the position where I am today and the university to where it is now. So I think it ultimately, you know, kind of really helped form me to push me, you know,
right.
Kind of give me motivation.
Absolutely. And also, I think another, just from an outsider's perspective, and, you know, still, I mean, we're obviously super in touch all those years that you were there. So
right.
Those down years that you had, you know, I remember exactly how those were. I mean, how bad that you wanted to win, but it just wasn't happening.
Yeah.
And that, I think, Iowa State for you really kind of gave you the first experience of failure and adversity. Even though personally you were succeeding,
right.
But the team that you were on was failing. The program was failing. You had a coaching change.
It was
all
hard
those
to balance,
things that to essentially throw you off your path were happening while you were in college.
Mm-hmm.
But that ATT like mindset that we started at that young age, you know, that carries you through times like that where you knew that wasn't your final destination. It wasn't your end all be all. You're going to give it all you have, but you're taking blows along the way, you know. And that was kind of the first time, I think, where you had to experience going through hard times of adversity.
Right.
And then obviously, what happened towards the tail end before you made the leap into the league. That's probably one of your biggest defining moments was on draft day.
Right.
At Buffalo Wild Wings.
Right. Yeah, I think, Coach Campbell and his staff, Rudy Wade, I think was a huge part of it as well, of just really helping, they pushed me to a level that I didn't even know was there. And really, I didn't even get to tap into while I was there. But they always held me to this crazy high standard that I really couldn't ever contemplate, because no one else was reaching that level of standard. So I didn't even, how could I reach this level when I've never seen it before, or have an example?
But isn't it funny how kind of life goes through in cycles, where that Campbell to you at that time in your life was to Brink,
right,
and our other coaches and mentors
6 years
at the beginning. Yeah, exactly. But it's the same exact thing, just on a much higher scale. Mm-hmm. You have that figure that's going to push you outside of your comfort zone, but then internally, you have your own personal standard too that reaches even beyond that.
Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, a good program has standards, has a good culture, all those things, but at the end of the day, if you're just still fitting into that mold, technically that's bare minimum.
Absolutely.
So it's holding yourself to that even higher personal standard that really only you know what the definition of it is. And you, at the end of the night, can look yourself in the mirror and know if you're reaching it or not. You're the only one that can answer that question. Right.
And that's something I didn't even realize, I didn't even come to fruition with until really I was in the league already.
Yeah.
I was in Jacksonville. So my time at Iowa State, I just remember Coach Wade especially just being on me all the time. The works that we did were just so tiring, so draining, so mentally battling. I just remember, I know for a fact that I'm as mentally strong purely because of those experiences and getting through those moments. Mm-hmm. And what it taught me was a lot that none of it was my physical attributes. It was the will to do something. It was the want to do it, and the mindset. And like I said, I didn't really, excuse me, I didn't really fully understand that at that time at Iowa State. But like you said, on draft day, which was, probably the lowest point of my life, I would say, or one of the, it was rough. I mean, you were there, you saw what happened and everything, and really not knowing how to handle that at that time. But it was really everything before that, the hardship at Iowa State, the struggles in high school of trying to make varsity, and then trying to get recognized at a national scale and everything. I think, all the different adversities I had gone through in life really prepared me for the biggest adversity that I was facing. And in a sense, it was life or death. At this point in my life, I had built such much of an identity into football as well that that's what it felt like. Yeah. And knowing that my hopes and dreams and my vision of what I wanted to do in my career could be coming to an abrupt end. Yeah. Really helped spark and motivate and push me to the level that those guys were trying to do. And, I think a lot of it was because I was comfortable at Iowa State, and I think, not, if I wasn't had that adversity when it happened, if I would have got drafted, who knows what would have happened? Maybe I still would have been.
It shook your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And, maybe I should have been very content, and I would try to work harder. Then next thing you know, I get cut, and then whatever. But now I think, having to face that hardest part from the beginning, and I was able to get through the hardest part, made me realize that, in a sense, it's almost smooth sailing from here. I've broken through that barrier. I've proven myself right, which I think is the most important part, but I've also been able to prove other people wrong, which I think, really has almost it's like such a great feeling in a sense, you know, to be able to go out there and prove other people wrong and something that you can really build momentum off of. And, you know, it's, in a sense now, it's like I look for anything for you to tell me I can't do so I can do it.
Right.
You know, and I think that's really what going undrafted.
You embrace people almost even more that hate on you versus the ones that support you.
Right.
But like on draft day, I remember, of course, that day being there. I mean, it was terrible. I mean, just watching all those names come off the board and knowing your talent, knowing who you were as a person, and knowing how much you deserved it. Not seeing it happen that day, but
and seeing other people like go that
of course, but
clearly better than.
But I just remember right afterwards, like you and I talking. But I personally had like, I was disappointed, but I also felt like at peace. Because, I mean, I of course, very vested into your career. Right. And I want to see you do everything that you say that you're doing, you know? And that was essentially the first time that you said you were going to do something and it didn't happen. But I felt like at peace knowing that, hey, if it didn't happen this way, it's going to happen another way. Happened to be Jacksonville, you know, I thought that like you were going to go out there and, you know, just be who you're going to be no matter what.
Right.
And of course, I mean, Jacksonville was even next level adversity beyond that, where you went through a period of time where you were still getting zero recognition for the talent and the person that you were.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think Jacksonville was such a pivotal moment. And and it's funny because honestly, it's almost like I almost blacked that part of my life out in a sense because of where I was as mentally, you know, where I was at mentally.
It was like a fog almost.
Yeah, and it was such a struggle and low point in my life of my identity of who I was and what I was doing, and if I was doing, you know, what was I doing, what was my purpose, and I wasn't getting recognition for what I was putting in so much effort and time into and trying to prove people that I could go out there and play. I remember just like the practices there, I would just be dead every single day, you know, 100-degree heat, and taking every rep at practice because that's what you have to do as a P squad guy, you know, and you don't get to go out there play. You have to hit the extra workouts, you know, you get paid less. So, you know, it was a huge struggle, and I was in my first time away from home, in a very unfamiliar city, and it was the most adversity I probably had faced, and I think just going through that time period, and then once I was able to get that call, like I remember getting the call from my agent telling me that that Green Bay wanted to activate me and to make me on the active roster, and I just remember like it just all clicked. Like it just all clicked, and it all made sense. And at that time, up until that moment, it didn't. You know, there was no vision. I didn't know what was going on. And then once I finally got that call, literally out of nowhere on a Tuesday morning, from my agent, the last time I was expecting, it was week 15.
Yeah.
Going into week 16, and you know I was disappointed because I knew that no matter what, I wasn't going to be able to get a credit season, and I think that was huge. You know, especially for me at that time, just getting the acknowledgement to say that I played a year, you know, and to get that chance, and because I didn't, and you know, it just felt so disrespectful that other players, you know, got the ability to do that.
Yeah.
And so when I got that call to come to Green Bay, it just, like I said, it just clicked, and I instantly knew what I was doing and where I was going,
right,
and how I was going to get there. And really, ever since I've touched down in Green Bay, I feel like my mindset and my path and my vision has been clearer than day. But you know, obviously, there's still been some hiccups upon this journey, even up until now, even especially right now. But
the big things that you got out of the way earlier, having that experience, you know, helps those little hiccups. They just seem like speed bumps at this point. any other big ones that are to come in the future, because they will. You've already had the experience of going through that, so you can navigate through it better. But I remember that transition too very vividly, where going from Jacksonville to Green Bay, I remember you calling me right afterwards.
Right.
And I could just hear how elated you were in your voice. How excited you were, like a weight had been lifted off your shoulders. Mm-hmm. And that you were getting your foot in the door, essentially. And you play that one game to get one target, one reception, 7 yards. Yeah, 7-yard catch. And then the next thing you know, you're in the offseason. Packers were in the playoffs. You're in the offseason. You're in Denver. And I remember we were hanging out in the offseason.
Yeah, I drove out. Came to visit you for a little bit. Yeah,
so we were hanging out in the offseason. And, up until that point, your career essentially was, you went undrafted.
Yeah.
You got cut from Jacksonville. You're on the practice squad all year, getting the shit kicked out of you. Mm-hmm. Then you get activated by Green Bay and you have one catch for 7 yards, and then all of a sudden you're in the offseason. That was your career up to that point. And so from any probably outsider looking in, it's like, you have the most pivotal year of your life coming up, and it could go one of two ways. You either make it or you don't. Mm-hmm. And so when you're not you think about all the possibilities of what could happen. As your friend, I was thinking about all the possibilities. Like, I don't know who Al Lazard is outside of, football, if that makes sense. It's like, you're a football player. Like, what would you do if you're not a football player? That's what I'm thinking about. Mm-hmm. So I remember we were talking, and you were almost talking to yourself. You were just saying all these things that were going to happen, and it was like you were just going through a moment of visualization of this is how it's going to be, and you're telling yourself out loud how it's going to be. I just happened to be in the room, and I kind of just interrupted you, and I was like, have you ever thought about, like, what if you don't make it?
What if I got cut?
Yeah, what if you get cut again? And you kind of just sat there, it seemed like, for minutes, and you just looked at me dead in the eyes. You're like, never even thought about it. So to me, like, that moment right there just really showed me, like, the real power of the belief that you had in yourself, that it was like, no, that's not going to happen. Like, I know that I'm going to do this. Like, this door opened because it opened for a purpose, otherwise you'd still be in Jacksonville. Like, something was going to come of it. And to you already knew exactly what it was going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think looking back on that moment, right, and looking back on that experience in the off season, how and why my vision was like that, because when I got that call to Green Bay and I came up here, my mindset going into the off season was I was on the active 53. They played me. Why wouldn't they play me again next year? You know, like the whole how the league turnovers and everything, and people get released from the contracts, and there's the new class in, and then off season acquires free agencies. Like, I didn't really fully understand that whole process and the position that I was actually in. Like, I believed in myself as I was one of the, not a starter maybe, but I was definitely one of the guys.
You're on the team.
Yeah, and definitely, like, in the room. And then I remember when I first got back here for the first day of spring training, and I was dead last on the every depth chart, and I was so confused.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wait, what? Like, how? Why?
What happened?
Yeah. And then I realized, like, okay, like, this is just, another obstacle, another speed bump.
It's just you having to prove yourself again.
Yeah.
And it's something that you just were already used to at that point.
Yeah, and I realized whenever my back was against the wall, like, that's when I performed my best.
That's when you feel your best.
And
Absolutely.
that's when I was able to do or have my best performances. And starting out in that spring, I didn't do that. I was not probably the best wide receiver I probably could have been from on the field and off the field standpoint. But then that summer, coming back and going to fall camp and realizing that, like, especially being a bigger receiver, like, I knew a lot of my game was physicalness and be able to put on pads, and we can't do that in the off season. But I was also learning a whole new offense. I didn't understand a lot of shit, but I was still hungry, and it was funny because I felt like at the time, like, no one was really helping me. I didn't feel like the coaches were really.
You're kind of on your own at that point.
Yeah, like,
figure it out or don't.
Yeah, I figured. I really felt that, and because of that, like, I started to make myself more accountable and put more pressure on myself doing things, and realizing that I had to stick out in different ways. And so I focused on the smaller details, kind of going back to how we talked about my dad, on how you would focus on every little thing, from the O-line to the quarterback to the DB to the linebacker to the ref. Like, that's how I started applying myself towards football and trying to be great in every little facet of the game, and knowing that I wasn't going to be the fastest out there, I wasn't going to be the quickest, but I could be the best blocking. I could be the smartest, and if I can know what the defense was doing, it could put me in a way better position, and I could be able to build that relationship and that trust with Aaron. That was my first goal, was just to be able to go out there and just to be able to play alongside him.
Earn his trust, yeah.
And to earn his trust, and that's something that I still even hone in for today, because I know he has.
It's like a daily challenge.
It is, yeah. And it's, in a sense, I'm competing with Devontae every single day, because they've had 7 years together, right, of knowing and playing. And, then I also recognize the fact that he's played with other great guys as well, Jordy, Randall, all those guys. And, like, so my competition now isn't even, like, me or Devontae. It's like, I'm trying to be the best that he's ever played with. What I'm saying? And that's what really motivates me now, and, like, helps me push me to that next level. And I know I'm so far away from it, like, such a end goal career, essentially, that I know I won't be comfortable anytime soon. Right. And
that's a good thing.
But yeah, and I think that's what, and having obviously Devontae in the room right now is a big reason for that, of why I can't be. But I think, kind of going back to going through camp and everything, I did everything. I made that shift going into camp, and I knew I was making the plays I needed to make, and I was getting the praise from him, from Aaron, from other guys, from reporters,
and that's like that, just like you talked about, like the first time that you started getting attention from rivals.
Right.
So now on the bigger scale, it's like you're starting to get that gratification that you belong here from more national media, or the local media in Green Bay,
right.
NFL. But that's giving you the feedback, essentially, that you need, or that you've gotten, but now it's on a bigger scale.
Right. And kind of going towards that validation thing of when Josh Hemholt first named me the #1 wide receiver. And then I remember specifically Aaron coming up to me in the lunch line one day and asking me, what do I have to do to get 13 down on my field? And it just instantly just like, wow, this is what I set out to do, essentially, and this is what's happening.
Wow.
And now I have to do it. It created such a huge accountability.
An urgency, essentially.
Yeah, an urgency and accountability in myself. Like, oh, the moment's here. Like, if you don't capture this moment now, then it's gone forever.
It's your fault.
It's gone forever. And that just really motivated me and pushed me to a whole nother level. And, but yeah, I think it also prepared me for a lot of things too. Just earning his trust and his accountability, and his praise, helped me fight through the fact that I ended up getting cut, later after the training camp, and that was another low point too. Not only had I gotten cut the year before.
You almost forget about that too,
And a lot of people do, and I remember that was one of the hardest moments of my life, comparing to the draft, and then getting cut and kind of experiencing my year in Jacksonville. But then now I had, like you said, like my vision was so clear and so picture perfect, and then I just couldn't even see myself getting cut, like you said. And so when that hit, it just hit me out of, like, sideways, out of nowhere. And it was hard to deal with. But I was very fortunate to be with Kevin King at that time. And the relationship that I built with him up until that moment was so substantial into helping me battle through the adversity of getting cut. And him being there at that moment and kind of just talking through things, but also just being a great friend and mentor for me has helped me get to where I am today. But, you know, getting cut and kind of going through that whole thing, like, it just only motivated me even more. Right. Especially because at that time I was broke.
And a typical person, too, is like, okay, it happened again. Like, right. That could be easily, like, where Alan Lazard gets defeated.
Right.
Is you get activated, you go through a whole offseason, boom, you get cut again. After a good preseason, too. Like, that time you actually had a chance to prove yourself, or in Jacksonville, right. You were barely on the field at all. Like, it's almost like you knew you were getting cut.
Mm-hmm.
Green Bay, I mean, that came out of nowhere, I think, to everyone that was in your life.
Right.
But fortunately, you know, that door was meant to open, and it opened up rather quickly, wasn't it? Literally the week later.
Yeah, so I ended up getting, I think I got cut on Saturday, Sunday, whatever it was, and then I got assigned to the active roster that following Friday, I believe.
Yeah.
They signed me, which is typically what happens throughout the NFL, but it's something that I didn't know and understand, and kind of the business side of it, of trying to hide lineups and everything. But, you know, at that point, it still didn't even matter. You know, I remember going to that week for practice. I was on the practice squad, and I was trying to be, you know, it was my first time to be able to play safety again since Jacksonville, because I was doing it on the P squad there. So now I'm doing P squad here in Green Bay, and I was trying to do safety. And I remember trying to be, you know, thinking like how I wanted to stand out somehow. So I was going to hit players. You know, I was going to make tackles. I was going to strip for the ball. Like, I was going to do whatever it took to stand out and just try to get active. But even though I did get active later that week, it's still like I wasn't involved in the game plan. I wasn't getting the recognition. And I felt like the respect that I deserved and earned. And it took me a while to understand and to be able to cope with that process and understanding the process of how that stuff works and why it takes a long time, and realizing that, the chip at that every single day, and then really just waiting for my right opportunity, you know. And once I understood that, I got way more self-fulfillment, self-joy, and way more at peace with who I was and what I was doing, because I realized that I wasn't in control. You know, I thought I was in control of everything, and that I was doing something wrong in a sense. But then I realized that everything that I could do in my control, I was doing right to the best of my ability, and I couldn't control the outside things.
And that's hard. That's like really hard to learn too, especially in athletics when you have so much success, and then boom, something like you said outside of your control happens to you, and it seems absolutely terrible. You don't necessarily know how to handle it, but you take way more ownership in that event than you're supposed to, when really the only thing that you own after that, and just why I feel like you feel at peace, is because you, instead of trying to control events and what happens to you, you're controlling just how you respond to those, and your response to those has just gotten so much more elite as you go.
Right.
Where now it's just, oh, this happened, okay, like, what do we have to do?
Right. All the other adversity has prepared me for this adversity and the future adversities, and knowing on how to respond to them and to not freak out in a sense, you know. And
just like your injury, you know, I mean, like, you had a great game against New Orleans, and that, you know, looked like to be the time where it's like you're going to hit the ground running, and then boom, like,
I'm out.
You're sidelined for 6 weeks, you're still going through it.
Right.
You know, but just watching how you've handled this too, it's just like at such an elite level where, yeah, you got hurt, but okay, like, you know, put me under the knife, and then what do I have to do to get back?
Yeah, and it's just knowing that, you know, I'm not going to win the Super Bowl in a sense, you know, back then, or even right now, you know, knowing that it's a long process, it's going to take time, and there's going to be ups and downs with it, and just trying to be able to try to take it in full stride. But yeah, I think becoming at peace with myself in those moments, at that time period throughout that season, really prepared me for that Monday night game, where I was going into it, really playing special teams only. At that point in my career, I had maybe a few snaps here and there offensively. I played like when I played, I think all my snaps were like protection, so I wasn't even like allowed to run a route. I was just blocking,
yeah.
And I just remember that being like the biggest slap in the face. Like, you can't even run a route. Like, you're only here to be, a blocker. And that just motivated me even more, And so when the event came, the Lions game happened, and we had guys that had already were injured going in the game, and a few guys went down, and it was looking bad. And I remember Aaron coming to the sideline after possession and just aggressively requesting for me to come into the game late into the fourth.
Yeah.
And I remember him looking at me and him giving me that look. And, this is some kind of going back to when he had first talked to me and said that, what do I have to do to get 13 down on my field? Of like him giving me that look that, I believed in you and like, let's go do this. And it just like, all right. Like, this is what I've been preparing for. This is what I've wanted to do. And just like everything else, it was I was going to the game least expecting that being the game that I was going to go out there. And, I go into every game thinking that I'm going to be making plays and doing this and that. But at that point in my career, playing special teams, I was way more special teams minded. I knew my plays offensively, but it didn't seem like, my number was going to get called.
Yeah.
At least not in that way, just because of the way the previous weeks have gone. And, it wasn't called by the coaches. It wasn't called by anyone else. It was called by 12.
Aaron. Yeah.
And him giving me that look just told me that, like, it's time and that this is when, like, you need to step up. And I went out there very, very relaxed, and I think the rest is just history from there, my first pass he threw to me actually ended up dropping, and when he called the second play in the huddle, or the play after that, and I knew it was going to be an out and up, and I was like, damn. First of all, I was dead tired, but, I knew he was calling that play to throw it.
Right.
And I'd be damned if I didn't bust my balls, and not be able to go make that play. And he ended up obviously making an unbelievable throw. But yeah, I think, kind of after that, it was just like, I finally felt like I was in and doing everything that I needed to do.
Yeah.
To be in the right position. And it made everything else beforehand make sense. All the pain, all the adversity, all the struggle.
Yeah.
All the winning or the losing seasons, all the horrible workouts, like, that was when, like,
that's when you got, like, your clarity.
The clarity with everything, and understanding that, like, everything that I do has a purpose, or needs to have a purpose, and needs to have, like, a long-term goal with it, because it's going to have an everlasting effect, no matter what it is. And so from that moment on, I think it just helped me be more confident and believe in myself even more, and push myself to another standard. And obviously having guys in the locker room, which I could go on for days on, just for me, who I am as a person, I look for motivation in anything, and the guys in the locker room make it very easy to be motivated, to go work hard, to do extra things, and to base my life off of them, in a sense of, like, am I putting the right
picking
word?
certain things from certain people. It's like
picking certain attributes, how I carry myself, how I'm portraying myself in the locker room, on the field, with you, and my relationships,
public face, like all that
yeah,
stuff.
and then, like, like, how am I, like, what am I doing? Am I putting the work in? Am I studying it right? Am I treating my body the right way? And the guys that we have in my locker room are the definition of pros, and those guys, I would say, have been probably the biggest influence throughout my entire career have really helped me excel to where I am right now. I think a lot of things have helped me get to this moment in the past year or so, but it was really those guys are the icing on the cake of really helping me get to this level of being at a elite level and be able to go out there and execute and be a vital point and a huge asset to a team and an offense.
Now that you're at the level you're at, you're having success at the level you're at, and backtracking all the way to when you're just a little kid, playing football in the backyard, this is where you wanted to be, you are living it essentially. But what got you here was, like we said, the ATT mindset that you've had your entire life. Well, now you're here. How do you feel like, is it tough? Is it a challenge to continue to push beyond? What is beyond that? You're already there. What's beyond being there already?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with that is just not setting a limit. I think a lot of what people think that success is, you can find it on a piece of paper. It's written down, and there's
once I reach this step, I'm done.
It's A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah.
No, it's an infinity sign. It's an everyday thing. There's so much that really goes into it, and so much that's unique to individual. To you, to me, that helps you be successful. But I think the success on the field, and coming into myself throughout that first season I had, really helped me go into the off season and kind of spring loading me into this year, kind of just figuring out a self identity outside of football, because I think especially with the climate of what the world's going through right now.
Going through an off season in a quarantine.
Yeah, and just realizing whoa, football isn't everything.
Right.
Which is something I wish I would have known a long time ago. Which I've had people, you hear people telling you all the time, it's not going to last forever. It's not going to last forever. You're going to have to do something else. But as a kid, obviously, it's hard to fully understand those things. And I think the quarantine is something that really gave me clarity with that. Of what am I doing outside of football? How am I...
it's in your face.
I'm already... Okay, so, not necessarily that I've arrived football, but I'm doing football where I want to be. But, what's my next thing? What am I going to do after that? How can I push myself in different ways? And that's where I feel I really try to adapt and been open-minded to so many different things, of trying to find motivation, trying to find ways to be the best me, and ways that I can help others be successful, be motivated, and ultimately, my whole goal is to love and inspire everyone.
Right. And to come full circle too, even, I think, anyone can say what they want about the quarantine, but for me, I take a lot of positives out of it, because, we spent countless hours on FaceTime in the quarantine.
Right.
What else are we doing, And that's when, we've had this ATT thing. Like I said, the origin started in middle school, 6th grade. It got its label sophomore year, and then it's stuck with us this entire time. There's never been a time where we haven't talked about it or said it, but it's always been just very exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
It's hashtagged, it's, things like that, but it's never been essentially concrete, and so you going through that phase in the quarantine where your normal daily regimen of just being a football player is essentially stripped away from you, or just the daily life of just living, anyone, their jobs, things of that nature, is just stripped away from you. And that can be a really scary time, because you start to think about things that you're not thinking about on a daily basis when you're just kind of running the race, And so you're thinking about, what am I doing outside of football? And then that's kind of we were on the same page, where it's hey, this ATT thing, it's been around for a long time, and it's obviously created such a special bond between you and I.
Right.
And also, it's allowed us to impact others in a lot of ways.
Tremendously.
Because, we know we're on the same page as far as, you know, the lifestyle, the standards, and the accountability that we hold each other to, even, you know, when we're with each other and when we're across the country from each other. It's always stuck there. But that was around the time where everything kind of came full circle, to me at least.
Right. I remember. I'm sure you remember too. It wasn't that long ago, but I just remember driving down to Chicago, and I was gonna go visit David, hang out with him, spend some time with him, see him and Deshante, and you FaceTimed me, I FaceTimed you, and literally we talked that my entire trip from here, Green Bay, down to Chicago. And
that was like a 3 hour.
And it just happened the most organic way, you know. We hadn't even really discussed it of trying to make what this is today.
Yeah.
You know, this wasn't even really a thought then, you know, of making this.
Or even just like too, like even to stop you for a second, like how that came into play. Like when you say organic,
right.
Like this whole entire thing has been an organic process, and that's why it feels so natural that it has to happen.
And in the perfect time for it.
And I mean, the logo essentially, like.
It's your handwriting.
Yeah, it's literally just. I picked up a pen and I wrote
and
it.
we all agree, like, you know, I remember sitting up here, up in my kitchen on this table, and FaceTiming Mike. What's up, Mike?
Eating paella.
Eating paella. some good paella. Paella. But yeah, man, it's just, that's really, you know, to kind of sum everything up, like there's so much that's really gone into where we are today, and really even bring us to the conversation right now.
I wish that we I really wish that I could just like see like you and I like sitting here with us, like we're 13, 14 years old.
Right.
And just to like hear the conversation, because to me, like when you take the perspective and you kind of zoom out, you're 25, you're turning 25, I'm 25 years old, and it's like, you know, you could talk to your 10, 12, 13-year-old self, and you're like, hey, here's all the things that you did, and here's like where you're going right now in your life. How do you think that yourself would feel back then? Because personally, I'd be amazed, you know, I mean, and that's just like, I feel like anyone can kind of have that perspective and kind of get away from all the negativity that's out there and all the social pressure that people feel about having to behave a certain way, how to act a certain way. But it's really like, you know, if I were to give myself a checklist of the things that I've done, and I was telling my 12-year-old self that, you know, like, remember my goal was to play for the University of Iowa when I was like 14 years old, you know, and it was checked off the list the next year with the offer.
Yeah, I think just going through those different moments, whether, for me, being here today, like, is so surreal in a sense, you know, like, if you say I'm talking to my 10, 12-year-old self, I never visioned myself playing for the Green Bay Packers, and I don't know why. It just never happened, you know. I envisioned myself playing for different teams, or maybe it was more so I just didn't even know who or where. And my idea and my perspective really only contained to Iowa, really in that local region, you know. And that's why it was so easy to go to Iowa State, because it was hard to see myself outside of there, because I hadn't experienced anything outside of that bubble in a sense, besides the AAU trips and the camps I've gone to. So being here today, it's like, it's happened so unsuspectingly, organic and natural. It helps me understand, like, just to be able to accept life for what it is and wherever it takes you, rather than trying to force and predict every little point along the way. You know, like, you can't, I mean, yes, you want to set goals and everything, but you can't necessarily expect yourself to check everything off.
You can't have like a certain like.
And it will happen in this exact same order, because that's not life, and I think that's what makes life beautiful too, is the unexpectancy and the authenticity of a lot of events and the things that you go through, you know, and that's what makes things organic in a sense. And so that's why, for me, it's kind of just wrapping all this thing up is that whole experience that I've had, you know, dating back to our relationship has just really helped me come into fruition of who I am today and accepting who I am as a person, as an athlete, as a friend, as a mentor, whoever. And being able to go out there and present my best self forward in whatever situation that it may be. And knowing that, too, I'm going to have failures along the way. You know, I'm going to have several failures, you know. These are probably just one of the bigger ones that we probably hit on, but, you know, we can sit here and go on to days and days and days on how many times I've failed and been embarrassed,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like, whether it's within a friend group or
anything.
Football, basketball, baseball, whatever, you know, like there's been so many different times where like in the moment I'm like, this is the worst feeling ever. I can never get out of this. Like I'll ever forever be stuck as this label. And I've diminished that idea and superseded that.
Right.
Into making myself into who I've always thought I was. And I think that has just been such an intricate part to being who I am today, and really kind of...
And that's why ATT is what it is too.
Right.
You know, because like through all the things that we've just discussed, and that's just like the tip of the iceberg essentially. These are just main checkpoints. But that has been there like with us from day one, essentially. And it lets me know personally when I'm off track of who I am. And I feel in sync when I'm on track with it, because that's essentially the backbone. I mean, that what ATT represents to me is I can tell when I'm out of sync with it. You know, I can tell like when I'm responding to adversity the right way or the wrong way, because it allows me to be honest with myself. Because it is that standard, you know, it's the lifestyle that you're supposed to live.
And you're able to see the growth too.
Right.
You're able to identify the growth, and in the smallest forms too now, rather than, you know, especially when you're younger, you look for the biggest accomplishments. You know, those are the only things you can
Just
put identity in,
like,
rather than the little things.
Navigating through just like relationships, because of course like you have so many people coming in and out of your life at this young age, where having like this, you know, allows you to kind of see like, is this person or does this group of people, do they match up with my values?
Yeah.
And am I going to mold to them, or are they going to mold to us? You know, or if it's not going to be a fit at all.
Right.
It gives you just so much clarity in so many different ways where you can really just trust your instinct and trust your heart, where you know something is right or not, just based on how you feel.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I feel like what we're doing it feels right. We don't even know what we're doing right now.
It's just like, it's just happening.
This whole thing even was made up 30 minutes before we started shooting, you know?
We have like, what, 3 things written down?
Yeah, a couple things here and there, but like, you know, I think that's what makes this at least fun, you know? It makes it enticing, is that we're just out here doing whatever, trying to do something. And we may not be the best right now. We know it won't be, because this is only the first take.
Well, just like in high school, like you know you're going somewhere,
Right.
And you know you're going to do something big, but you don't know exactly what it is yet. And that's what it feels like when everything's happening the way it's supposed to happen, right, organically. Like, you know, you have the belief that something is going to happen, it's going to be good. There may not be good things that happen along the way, but it's going to be good. And that's the same exact feeling. Like, you know that you're in sync when you have that feeling. You know, and you have the pressure, essentially, the internal pressure, the healthy pressure and competition that you feel on a daily basis, where it's like, hey, I got to be my best. You know, like, I mean, if I'm not my best, like, it's not going to happen. I have to be my best.
Yeah. That sums it all up.
Cheers.
Cheers to that, man. Water.
Yeah, no point, no foil.
Yeah, no, apoyo, no foil. Probably not even saying it right. But man, it's been a great conversation today. First of probably many to come between us maybe some future people.
Yeah.
Future people that we haven't even met yet.
Right.
Or don't even know exist.
Excited for them.
Excited to see where this goes. Especially in the next few weeks and months, but really 10, 15 years from now.
Absolutely.
See what we can do.
All right, brother.
All right, man. At the top.
Check it out. ATT.